Okay. There's a formal bio of Ariel in the notes, so I won't read that out loud. I'll just tell you all that she's a little homegrown girl. She went to Central High School. She's a twin. She's my pride and joy, as well as her sister. And tell a very quick story, and that is that everyone thought this little girl was going to grow up to be an actress because she was so outgoing and theatrical. And I worked at Centennial High School at the time as a school psychologist, and things would cross my desk. And I heard about this engineering camp that was put on by the University of Illinois. And just to be very counterintuitive, I thought this would be great for a girl to go to engineering camp. And I just wanted her exposed to some of that STEM, but in those days, nobody knew that word STEM. And anyway, it was a 1-week program, excellent program. And she went, and only direction I gave her was don't hang back and let the boys do everything. And sure enough, she had a great week. It drew kids from all over the community and all over the state. And one time during that program, a woman engineer, pulled her aside and said, Ariel, I like the way you think. You should be an engineer. And so indeed, after she graduated from Central High School, she was accepted into the University of Illinois College of Engineering program and was a material science and engineer major. So very proud of her, and I'll let her take it from here.
Yeah.
Okay, and folks, if you would please mute yourself. Mute. Please mute yourself so we don't have all kinds of stray stuff coming in. Ariel, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I wish all my meeting intros went like that. Thanks, Mom, for the kind words. So really excited to be chatting with you all today. What I'll do is I'll share sort of an overview about Facebook's response to COVID, which has been probably the most disruptive event and global pandemic certainly of my lifetime. I would imagine of many of yours as well. Sort of this outlier event that will forever shape humanity and the arc of our history. And so it's taken a real toll, I think, both from a human and an economic perspective, certainly on our people and our business. But I also think that it's provided for a huge opportunity to step forward and to think about how we want to be different, how we want to show up differently and add value back. So I'll share some thoughts, and then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A, and I want this to be super interactive. So if you have questions, if you have builds, I'd love to hear it as well. And thanks in advance for having me. So I'll start by sharing, and this is obvious in retrospect, but COVID affected different geographies at different times. And so, for me sitting in the United States, we had the benefit of seeing how our colleagues in Asia first responded and what the implications were from a business perspective, but also from a human capital perspective and a culture perspective at work. So this continues to evolve now that we're in different phases of reopening across the world. We're starting to see different implications. So this is an ongoing fluid situation. I'll start by saying that. And the way we approached sort of the response to COVID was 4 key pillars and 3 key phases. So those 4 pillars were, number 1, people. And that was really about keeping our people, our tens of thousands of employees safe and healthy. The second was around product and making sure that for a platform that serves 3 billion people around the world, that we could ensure there was the right information getting in front of them. You might recall early on, especially, a lot of lies about what types of medicines you could use. And if you just take a little bleach, like a lot of misinformation. So ensuring that the correct and right information was getting put in front of people. The third was around business. This has been a really fascinating event from a business perspective because in many respects, COVID decimated certain travel verticals, for example. And on the other hand, it surged capacity for e-commerce, for online gaming. And so actually being able to meet clients where they are and support them on this journey has been very interesting. And then the last pillar is infrastructure. And for our own servers, for Facebook's usage, we saw a spike because people were quarantining, they were in lockdown, and they reached out to connect with each other. And so making sure that our platform actually worked as intended was another 4th really big priority for the company. And I'll go into a little bit of detail into each of those and sort of speak to some interesting stories. The 3 phases that we think about, and again, this is all wonderful in retrospect, and in real time it was crazy, is respond, react, and reemerge. And so the thinking there is that, and I think you've seen this play out just even in how the government has responded in different states for sure. But there was an immediate reaction. There was an immediate almost whiplash, like what is happening? And we had to very quickly pivot what we thought was normal, what we thought was, course of business to address the situation at hand. Now we're entering that reemerge phase, which is, economies are starting to reopen, businesses are starting to stabilize, particularly in different parts of the world. And so how can we actually advance and make progress, particularly when it comes to the economic recovery, in a way that originally that wasn't where our head was at, because we had to first respond to this global pandemic. And I think it's important to also recognize that there's a certain passing of the baton, and being able to spot those phases and the maturity of different businesses, different countries on that journey is valuable, because this is just a very nuanced situation and it requires agility. So I'll start with the people. This is, I think, a place where Facebook really led. I've been at the company over 7 years. I've worked in different offices. And so when I first joined, under 5,000 people, now there's over 50,000. And so seeing how our people team is what they call it, our HR team really responded and activated was pretty profound. What I'm proud of is the fact that we took a leadership approach around what we're calling remote workforce. You can imagine that we're a technology company. It's a communication platform. And so we use, as an employee, I use Facebook products every day to do work. That's how, we use groups, we use chat, we use the full product suite to actually get work done. And so being told very quickly on, I think it was March 8th, we said, don't come back into the office for folks in New York. Being told that you're going to be remote, we don't know when you're going to come back into the office. And even though it's a very social culture, you're expected to be productive, but also the first priority is you. And so we want to make sure that you have the right care, that you're healthy, et cetera. So there was a lot of leadership there. More recently, Mark Zuckerberg has announced his perspective on remote workforce, which is that we're going to be hiring possibly 50% of our workforce to be remote in the next decade. And I think that's really important, and I harken back to my days in Champaign. But when you think about where talent in this country especially lives, folks congregate in part around the coast, around major cities, and those happen to be more expensive places to live. And there's this barrier of entry if you're someone who's talented, but maybe you grew up in a rural place, that you have to relocate to get opportunity and to have that economic mobility. And so by saying that we're going to have people who are full-time remote, what that tells me is that I can hire an excellent, talented engineer in Iowa who doesn't have to relocate to, let's say, Chicago as the nearest Facebook office, and who can provide for his or her family in a way that is meaningful and will start to make a difference in the local economy for that person. And so I'm excited about what I think is going to be the democratization of opportunity and really shortening that barrier of entry for talented people all around the world who now have the option of being remote full time. So I think that's a really good thing coming out of COVID. I think that, previously we believed that there was a lot of value to FaceTime and to having those meetings in person, getting on those planes. But I think this is one of the upsides of COVID. A couple other things I'll share. We have a culture of what we call hackathons. And so people come together, they build, and we tend to take a very sort of open source approach in which we say, I want all of your ideas focused on this problem. And so very quickly on, we stood up different task forces around how we would grapple with COVID, especially for our people. And we had a global hackathon, and we did town hall meetings where we brought in experts, and we also brought in folks at competitive companies, and we said, let's just build together. And I think that collaboration, that spirit, has also been meaningful over the course of this journey. The second pillar is product. I mentioned earlier that it was, first of all, a top priority to make sure that people got the right information immediately. And so we did a few things pertaining to that. First of all, we partnered with the WHO and the CDC to provide them with ad credits so that they could amplify their message and get it in front of people with no restriction. I think that was really important. We built a COVID center where you can go and get information to this day that shows rate of transmission in your area, really hyper local insights and data that people use to figure out how they want to approach their life. I can tell you, I personally look at New York City's data every single day to understand the nuance and the depths of what I feel comfortable doing and what risks I'm willing to take, even just as a consumer and as a person. We also built a platform called Community Help. And this is something, again, I'm very passionate about this area, but we realized that, if you're an elderly person, you might not feel comfortable going to the grocery store, but you have a community of people who probably care about you and who are hyper local. And so Community Help is a platform that marries that supply and demand curve, where you can post and say, I'd love to get groceries. Can someone drop them off on Wednesday and I'll pay you? And sure enough, a neighbor could get on Facebook, go on Community Help, volunteer their services and drop off groceries. And, I use one example, but you see that play out in multitudes, whether it's jobs, whether it's mentorship and learning. And so I think it's a really nice example of how the product could be used for good and how people can come together even amidst this crisis. The third pillar is business. And this is where I sit. This is where my head's at, the vast majority of the time. And I mentioned up front that we thought about the business evolution in different phases with react, respond, and reemerge, and also that different businesses had different, some had really big headwinds, some had really big surges in demand. And so being able to be nimble was really important here. But we did a few things. Number one, we recognized very quickly on that small businesses were most at risk. I'm sure for many of you, in the Champaign-Urbana area, you probably have, whether it's a local, a bakery, a plumber, whatever it may be, who you care about. This is your neighborhood. This is the fabric of your culture, of where you live. And there is a certain, I think, charm and heartwarmingness of walking around and seeing those businesses thrive around you. And many of those are at risk of not reopening. We researched 86,000 small business owners and affiliates on our platform and asked what they were experiencing, and 31% were worried because they had shuttered their operations, and 28% were worried about cash. And so we did a few things pretty quickly. One is we built a business resource hub, which is free. It's a place where businesses can go to get tools specifically focused on resilience and how to bridge the gap, specifically for a lockdown situation where they had to shutter their operations, whether it was upskilling. People could learn new skills and get online training for free, whether it was frameworks and product tutorials about how to best grow their business online. But this was an important, quick response for us to get all the right information to businesses quickly. The second is we realized cash is king. Businesses are most concerned with liquidity and solvency risks. And so we built a grants program where we committed $100 million to 30,000 small businesses in the 30 countries, many of which were places where we operate and where we had Facebook offices, so that we felt like we were part of that community already. And I think that was important because it also underscored that we wanted to get cash quickly, even faster than the payment protection program and the SBA loans that were taking a long time to get into the pockets of those small business owners. And specifically, something I'm very passionate about is we had a quota where we said, for half of the grants in the United States, so $20 million, we're going to have a specific carve out for eligible minority and women-owned businesses. We've seen now play out in press and in the research that minority business owners were facing outsized devastation, as were broadly minority communities. And so being able to have that intentional target to say, we're going to help, we're going to do more here, I think is really special. A couple other things I'll share. We have this product called Workplace, which is our sort of business to business platform. So it looks like Facebook, it sort of feels like Facebook, but it's meant to be used in the office. And we said, we're going to waive licensing fees so that for companies that are quickly pivoting to be online, to be digital, to be remote, they have this tool that might be more productive for them than getting on a phone call or using email. And we're going to provide that for free. And I'll share some stories now, because I think it's also special to punctuate this with ways that I think humanity really showed through. So one is called Club Quarantine. This is a an Instagram DJ named D Nice who had a party, you know, and we saw this popping up a lot, but people convene just like, you know, just like this digital convening of people, but there was music, people were dancing, and specifically wanted to raise funds for historically Black colleges and universities. And so they, you know, they made it a party. They brought in celebrities. They had this great DJ, and sure enough, 5,000 donors raised $250,000 during a 5-hour event. And we see a model like this really play out in different ways, whether it's small businesses going live or different streams around musicians. This has been a common technique where people are fundraising, but also connecting and convening in meaningful ways. And I'll also share this story of a small business in the UK called Country Dog Hotel that saw that a lot of people, you know, particularly for essential workers, had to go in, but everything else was shuttered. And so what do you do with your pet when you have to go into the workplace? And so this hotel opened up its doors and said, you know, we'll take care of your pets. They reached out. They had you know, a canine shelter, and they were able to use Facebook and Instagram as their community base to bring in these dogs and make sure that all the pets were taken care of, while the pet parents, you know, went into the office and you know, were our hospital workers and stocked our shelves and such. And so that was just a beautiful example of ways in which communities, I think, rallied and were innovative and really produced goodness during a time of despair. So I'm going to pause there. I know I shared a lot, but I'd love to open this up if there are thoughts, if there are questions. I'm happy to go into more detail in certain places. And thank you.
I have a quick question.
Kind of concerned.
Where can we find some of these links and some of these programs on Facebook? Is there a way you could send this out to us?
Of course, I will absolutely share the links and the resources. I'm glad you asked. Yes, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
I was kind of concerned about all the commercial space that will suddenly may not have a purpose now that companies have discovered that they can work at a distance. But hearing the way you've put it with the democratization of talent kind of was an eye-opener, and that kind of that concept was refreshing to hear. So thank you for sharing that with us.
I'm glad to hear that too. You know, it'll be fascinating to see what happens. I assume you're referring to commercial real estate and whether people are going to ever, you know, inhabit offices again. I think they will. And one thing I'll share is, personally, I will absolutely go back to the office when it's safe to. I think it's an and, where people who are productive in offices and want to be in offices, especially for folks, by the way, with young kids at home who have been homeschooling and trying to work full time, they will be happy to get out of the house and go back to work. But I also think for a broader talent pool, this is a wonderful step forward in making progress and building equality into our work.
Right. Thank you.
So how do they base, for instance, when advertisers want to get involved with Facebook, is there a different, I guess, monetary situation where different companies, depending on their size, how much time they're going to spend on Facebook, you know, how much visibility they get, would all have something to do with how much that cost is?
Yeah, so the way it works is that we have over 140 million businesses that we serve on our platform, and 8 million of those are paying advertisers. So I'd start by saying the vast majority of our businesses actually use Facebook for free. They have pages. You know, you talk about a barrier of entry. If you're, let's call it a baker, and you want to quickly have a digital storefront, guess what? That's expensive. To build a website, to figure out how to manifest your brand online, that's expensive. That takes time. That takes certain skills. We can provide you a business page on Facebook for free within minutes. So that's number one, is that our services are used for free. And I think that's the way it should be, and that's wonderful. But specifically in terms of how much advertisers spend with Facebook, it's based on their goals. How many people do they want to reach? How many campaigns do they want to run? What are the goals that they have for their businesses in terms of growth, in terms of raising awareness? So it really depends on the situation. But you're right in that we do have some of those big global clients that spend more, and then we have many, many small businesses that spend less. But that's also, those small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. and of our business model.
Terrific. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, lately they've been talking about how people might be able to block political ads on what they see. How does that affect then, for instance, if I'm, working for Joe Biden and I want to have so many ads on the whole thing, and you're saying, well, okay, that's going to be X amount of dollars to do this. But then they come back and go, yeah, but all these people are going to be blocking maybe our ads, and it's going to affect the number of people that see the ads.
It's such a good question. It's so timely and it's so complicated and nuanced. And so you're absolutely touching on the tension, which is how do you give 3 billion people freedom of expression and also choice in what they see, and also provide them with information from politicians. And so, the stance that we've taken is, and our policies continue to evolve on this front. Again, I'm happy to share follow-up information in greater detail. But the stance that we've taken is you should have the option of seeing what your politicians put out into the world on Facebook. If it is clearly against our community standards, and it's clearly violating, we'll either take it down or we'll put, a disclaimer on it. And we have certain protocols around that. We have a team of over 30,000 people who review content every day to test for things in terms of whether it's violence, whether it's, any kind of criminality in the content, et cetera, exploitation. But you're correct. There are people who will not see that content if they choose to block those ads, and that is their choice, and we want to respect that. We also want to respect, let's take, Joe Biden and his team. We want to give them the option of being able to share their voice on Facebook. And I think it's important to call out here specifically, and this is the stance that we've taken and hopefully we'll continue to take, which is, let's say we decided to eliminate, political ads on the platform. That is a much better outcome for the incumbent than for new entrants. So by siphoning that communication, you actually hurt the broader diversity of new voices entering the political arena, and you do a greater service to the incumbent. So we want to make sure that we're towing the line and we're giving everyone equal opportunity and access to be able to express themselves to the communities they care about.
Well, so when you go to censorship and you look at the issues of not only politics, but you look at the issues of violence, you look at the issues of child pornography. You said you have 30,000, or Facebook does, 30,000 folks scanning those things. How does that stream down to the final decision making on what content is allowed, what content isn't allowed? Yeah. There's a lot of grayness in that whole arena of what becomes a First Amendment right and what becomes something else.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll share a couple things. Number one, we're trying to make this as automated as possible. So you can imagine we're at a point now where there's literally enough bytes of data that we can write algorithms and machine learning to detect, for example, use of violence, child pornography, what have you, to detect it before a human even ever has to report it. So we're able to take down like 99% of ISIS content, terrorist content, before it ever actually hits your eyes. So that's the goal, is that across all dimensions, we're able to train algorithms to be able to detect it before humans have to report it. Absent that, and that's still a work in progress, and we've made a lot of strides, but absent that, we have tens of thousands of people around the world checking content. And then specifically to your point, this has come up, and we've been certainly, we've received many areas of feedback. We say at Facebook, feedback is a gift and every day is Christmas. But specifically to your point, we have now a governance board that was stood up where you can appeal. And this board is comprised of a range of diverse backgrounds and voices. And so if you believe that content was taken down and you disagree with that decision, you can appeal it. And Mark Zuckerberg honors whatever the board decides is what happens. And so again, it's an interesting tension of, I don't think you want a company, based in the Bay Area making decisions and being the arbiter of what you see. We do want an algorithm to be able to largely detect a lot of that information, particularly for the really bad, scary stuff, but also to give people the option to appeal. and this continues to be areas that we evolve, that we constantly are working on because it is so important.
So what about fact checking?
We have fact checkers, and increasingly, specifically for news content, we have teams that curate high quality news. So they actually, if you go into the news tab on Facebook, you'll see content that was curated. You'll also see news that if there is any incorrect information, it has a disclaimer specifically on it. But then of course you get into the debate, which I'm sure we can save for another time, which is, when you look at, let's say, satirical content, what do you do with that? What do you do, articles from The Onion? Is that fact? Is that fiction? Is that someone's opinion? So again, these things are nuanced, and they're multidimensional, but we try to get it right.
Ariel, I have a question about small business, but thank you for coming, speaking to us. It's
Right.
great. I have a small business, and it's a printing company, and we can make signs, and we made a sign for a local Champaign independent restaurant to let people know as they drive by that they have carry out and curbside pickup. And we took a picture of the sign, took a picture of the restaurant, and we posted it on our company's Facebook page. And then I had the opportunity to boost that. And by boosting it, you pay what I think is a very reasonable amount, $5, $10, and you can increase the amount of people that can see it. So we did that, and then I have a choice as how do I want to boost that? So I chose an age group of people between 30 and 70. That's all I did. There's other ways you can choose, but I'm new at this, so I chose that. And it was great, but then all of a sudden, all these people in our local community thought it was really a fun idea to tell everybody else how their bad experience at this restaurant was. And it's a great restaurant. It's one of the top restaurants. In fact, they were voted the best restaurant in Champaign several times in the News Gazette. But we have all these other actors coming out wanting to tell everybody in their lives the bad experience that they've had there. And if they could probably lower their prices if they saved money and not put signs up. So it was a very interesting learning experience as to what you're going to get when you try to let people know about helping people in your community. You're going to get other people coming out saying how bad their community is. It's just an amazing. I couldn't understand it. If you have nothing positive to say, don't say anything. But a lot of people have to say things.
Yeah, I think that's a common experience where you post something and people share their comments and their opinions, and it, on the one hand, it invites discourse, and maybe the restaurant looked at that feedback and thought, oh, what, we can do that better. And on the other hand, it's annoying. So yes, I hear you for sure. But that's great that you were able to hopefully help amplify that restaurant's foot traffic and hopefully drive their sales during this lockdown. So props to you for trying the ad.
So I've been a Facebook user for a lot longer than I've had it as a business Facebook. And I've always been a kind of question why Facebook for business operates differently than Facebook for just the regular public. When did that all evolve? When did Facebook for business become active?
That's a great question, actually. I don't think I know the year in which, at least a decade, but let me come back on that year. A lot of, I think what I'm hearing from you based on what you're sharing is that you're a more sophisticated, first of all, you're a user, but you're a business person on Facebook. So you just have a more sophisticated set of needs for what the product and the tool can provide. Most people just want to come and connect with their friends. And so we have to build products that serve different needs and different audiences. And so you're right, the business page is going to look very different from the personal page. And by the way, workplace also looks different. So B2B, and using this as an efficiency, employment platform for communication also looks different. So we try to make and to customize the user interface in a way that's most suitable for the audience. And by the way, we spend a lot of time looking at product feedback. I mean, I spent the first few years in my career focused almost exclusively on consumer feedback on our products, to how to make them better and higher quality and ensure that they are actually useful to people. But you're right that those experiences are different, but I think you're also in a unique position in which you see both and you're able to experience and sort of provide feedback on each.
What is Workplace?
Workplace is our B2B offering. So it's basically Facebook for work. So it's, imagine if you used Facebook at your company, interact with your employees, with groups, with chat, with pages, imagine if that was your experience. Again, I'm happy to share a link to it after. I can follow up.
Let me ask you a question. How do you see the future of dealing with the bots that are really, who will really try to influence? It kind of goes along with Paul's comment too. There's a lot of people who. How do you deal with that? What's your feeling about the future with that?
You're referring to bots like that spread misinformation or that quickly, or like trolls?
Not it's bots, it's trolls, it's kind of a coordinated, sometimes monetary, sometimes political, sometimes it could be anything, ideological.
So it's a great question. I would say, let me start by saying, one of the principles that we take around governing the platform and even building the product is real identity. And so any person on Facebook has a real identity. You have to have a name, a face. Not everyone has photos up, etc. But you identify as a person. Versus other platforms, you don't have that. And so even, we have age constraints, right? You're supposed to be above 13, et cetera. So that's number one, is that our starting principle is that you are a real person, identifying in your authentic self on the platform. And so to that end, we don't have any bid for bots and for trolls and for any fakeness. And so, when I mention the work that our teams do to eliminate bad content on the platform, very much trolls and bots and things that are spreading misinformation. Because I think what you're describing, the common case is that a bot might proliferate a message very, very, very quickly in a way that humans wouldn't possibly be able to do. How do you spread a piece of information, thousands of times in a minute, right? People can't do that, bots can. And so we have no bid for that. We have no desire for any of that to be on the platform. To this conversation, things come up and we constantly are having to address them, ideally before people even see the content. And so our systems get good enough at detecting these things proactively. But yeah, that's my short answer. And I think other platforms are handling this in other ways.
So how many employees worldwide do you know that Facebook has?
Yeah. So, I think our last earnings call, we publicly shared, it was over 45,000 in over 60 markets. And then we also have a contractor base, but yeah, it's continue to grow. And certainly we're always looking for good talent. So if you know people in your community who you think would be great, please feel free to email their resume over, and I'm happy to do a referral, because we're always trying to find great talent.
Cool. Oh, that's great. I'll tell you what, you're a very impressive young lady. I got to give your mother some credit here.
Credit is due.
Ariel, not to take up your entire day, but I think, is there a last question from anybody?
I had a question. Paul had mentioned boosting your Facebook posts. I'm actually with a different Rotary club, Champaign Rotary, and we post at least once a week, sometimes twice a week on Facebook, something about our club. And frequently, I will get messages, boost this post to reach more people. And I've always been afraid to do it. So
maybe now you'll be inspired based on this conversation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said maybe now you'll be inspired to. Look, I would say, it depends on what you want to. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to reach more people, if you want to expand your community and maybe introduce new people to that Rotary Club, I think it's certainly, I'm going to tell you, it's a great product and it's a great way of doing so. But I'm also biased. So yeah, I think it's an important way to reach the communities you care about.
Okay, thank you.
With Janet, this is the first time we boosted, and I was amazed at the amount of spread that the boost caused.
Well, I might try that. And I personally love Facebook. I am a retired teacher and principal. I used to work with your mom at Centennial.
Oh, that's so nice.
I love being able to stay in touch with my former students and families. That's just so wonderful to me.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I, as a student, in Champaign, I'm friends on Facebook with my second grade teacher, and it's just it's amazing. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
We post CU Sunrise on Facebook, semi-regularly, because that's my responsibility. But we think that maybe this meeting and the post for it will be one that we might boost. So if you don't mind,
Oh. Well, thank you for that.
kind of close the loop on Facebook with that. So thank you.
Ariel, thank you. And
Thanks for having me.
I suspect if there's some more questions, people can pass them through your mom to you or something.
Perfect.
And now this is my last regular meeting as president. And Carrie was in this position a year ago, right, Carrie?
Yes, I was.
And so part of what I've done as president is Carrie gives us a thought for the week to go out on.
And this is the part I feel like I should apologize to our guest for having to put up for this thought for the week. Originally, Daryl had told me, I want you to tell a joke at the end of every meeting. So, I had to come up with some humorous thought. And part of this, pandemic, the more time we have to spend at home and we're doing research, we're finding different things. And I love all this you've talked about today, but I found some very interesting research the other day. I was reading through something online, and it was talking about if you take all the organs out of the inside of your body and lay them end to end, you'd be dead.
Yeah, that's the best you can do.
Whoa.
Once again, we have some great wisdom from Carrie.
Hey, on a total different note is Mary Kay. Just a quick, since we're moving into a new Rotary year, if we want to keep the fruit sale and make 300,000, we're gonna have to sell 27,000 cases.
That's right.
Or we're gonna have, otherwise we have to raise the price to $800 a case. So there's opportunity here.
There are 1,000 cases per member.
I'm just saying.
We might have to boost that ad.
Daryl,
Yes.
I want to say thank you for your service. You've been a great president.
Yeah.
Thank you, Auntie.